All right, everyone. Welcome to the Terra Talk. We have some people joining in. So we will let a few more people come on in to the Terra Talk. It is open enrollment. So thank you all for taking time out of your very busy schedules to participate. I've had a number of people reach out and be like, oh man, I'm swamped during that time. I won't be able to make it, open enrollment. So I really appreciate everyone joining in. All right, and as you can see in the chat room, Darcy's chiming in at the chat. One great thing about our Terra Talks is that we want this to be a really interactive experience. And so anyone who's here, guests who are joining us, joining the panel, feel free to comment in the chat. Darcy is in the background. She is our director of marketing, and she is going to be like making sure we hear your comments and interactions. So let's go ahead, and what do you say we get started? I'm going to have Jeff and Sid and Chad unmute themselves, and we're going to get started. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So since we're talking financial wellness, one of the things I think is the best way to start this conversation is with a meme. And I think this might be an expression of how people are feeling about their financial situation. It's just kind of crazy. Things are heating up. Gas is getting expensive. You name it. The normal, common. Why can't I talk, guys? I was just telling you guys all this stuff, and now I just went blank. I can't even talk. Things are getting expensive.
Because your house is on fire, Jake. That's why.
Yeah, Jake. Everything is fine. Everything is fine.
Everything is fine. Everything is fine. And we're trying to play dumb. We're trying to be like, oh no, it's fine. We're going to get through this. But really, I thought this was crazy. This is all the financial wellness articles that are popping up just recently. Even one of them is as recently as yesterday. So to the guests who are chiming in, who are joining us, or the panel here today, what do these articles stand out to you? Any of these articles stand out to you?
I think the thing for me is this is affecting everybody. This isn't a millennial conversation. It's not a retirement conversation. It's not a minimum wage conversation. It's a conversation that really is affecting everybody.
Yeah. 100%.
I try to echo that as well. I think that traditionally when we thought about financial wellness or essentially the money situation, we thought, oh, it's just folks that are living paycheck to paycheck. But guess what? Like that headline says at the top right, it's basically all of us that are living paycheck to paycheck. So this is a very timely topic for us.
Even half of six-figure earners, like that's crazy.
Yeah, that's the thing that jumped out at me when I saw that was like, this is crazy. I mean, the dream was to get the job, right? That you could earn six figures plus. Like that was like all right, like you're in a good place. And now it's not even just like low six figures. Like as we've been digging through and talking to a lot of the employees out there, even those that are earning like 200,000 are still saying they're living paycheck to paycheck. It's not just the $100,000 earners. So yes, it definitely affects everybody, no question.
And it is, and uniquely, I think it's unique that the employees are actually turning to their employers for financial help. And that's why we've pulled you all here together. And so that everyone knows who our panelists are today, we have Sid Pila, sorry about that, Sid Pila. He's a CEO and founder of Sunny Day Fund. Jeff Morgan is a VP of Business Development for Salary Finance. And Chad Schneider is the head of broker partnerships at Origin. And I have been privileged enough to get to work with both Jeff and Chad. And I even met Sid in Vegas a couple months ago. So I know all three of these men personally, and I love what they're doing with their focus. Also in the background, Darcy is our director of marketing here. She's running the background. She pulls all of this together and actually makes it happen. So thank you, Darcy. And she'll also be monitoring the chat room there. But I get a number of questions of like, why are we doing these Terra Talks? And we are a benefits administration company, and we also have very robust administrative services. And so clients start asking us questions, right? They build a relationship with us primarily because we have a dedicated client executive that is assigned to each one of our clients, so that we really function as an extension of your HR team. And so a lot this year, we've been getting this question about financial wellness, right? And so one of the things that we are doing as a company is really building a library of best in class resources. And so we can make recommendations. And that's why I've connected or reconnected with guys like Jeff and Chad and Sid. And so we want to be able to share these resources with everyone because we all need them. And so that's why we do Terra Talks. We want you to be able to interact with these people and learn, and you can reach out to them directly if you want to kind of learn more about any of their or all of their companies that they represent and really what they do and do uniquely. So to keep the conversation going, I would love for everyone to chime in here. How much is inflation costing the average family each month? Do you think it's over $650, about $450, $250, or D, is inflation good for the budget? What do we all think here?
Yeah, I was going to say that despite all the articles saying you got a rate increase or a bump in pay because of inflation and tax bracket, you're like, is that how we're spending it now?
Right?
Yeah.
Jake, I know my $5 footlong at Subway cost me $10.50 the other day. So I'm gonna guess the highest number here. I think A stands out to me.
Oh, nice. In the chat, we have an A plus B plus C. We've got
That's probably more accurate, Andrew.
right. But yeah, so check this out. We have about $650 to $750 a month for the average family. And so where you were budgeting and what you were initially doing a few years ago or even last year, just you are feeling the crunch of what is going on with how inflation is impacting the average family household. And so rather than me talk, you guys are the experts. You are the reason that the people are here because we've invited you to come share your wealth of knowledge. And so Chad, please introduce yourself to everyone. And then if you can, tell us a little bit about what the term financial wellness means for 2022, but also looking into 2023.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me, Jake. Good to be on the panel with everybody. I'm Chad Schneider, head of broker partnerships over at Origin, and been in the space for over 20 years in employee benefits, working with brokers, and a little over a year at Origin, specifically with financial wellness, which is great. So yeah, as we get into 2023, ending 2022, this year has flown by. It's really interesting to see like how financial wellness has evolved. Just is, I think to your point, employees never went to an employer to ask them around like, what do I do with money? And like over the pandemic, we obviously saw a lot more employers taking a much more paternalistic approach to the employees and offering a lot more services to be able to help. Because let's face it, right? Like 8 to 5, 9 to 5 doesn't exist anymore. We're all at home, we're Zooming, everything is blending in. So the ability to actually help an employee is going to be, the key focus. And to everything we've been talking about, we are literally in this once in a generation challenge where we've heard some crazy stories and feedback that, were kind of astounding where like, if this is one of your first, couple jobs out of college, this might literally be the first time in your entire career that you've seen a negative growth rate on your 401k, right? For the last decade, even if it was a 5%, growth rate, it was still 5%. Now, a single digit decrease is better than the market, right? Like market's down 22%. If you're under 10%, decrease, like you're actually winning right now, which is kind of crazy to think about. So any one of these things between stock market, 401k, interest rates, living paycheck to paycheck, any one of these on their own would be daunting enough. But the fact that they're all coming together at the same time, and then we're also trying to figure out this like post-pandemic world. I mean, think about this. 6 months ago, we were still kind of on lockdown, right? Like we weren't fully integrated back into the world here. So it wasn't that long ago, even though time flies like that. That's really what this is looking at. So financial wellness has to evolve to be able to get a much more personalized approach to the employee because everybody has very unique situations. And we know there's upwards of like 4 to 5 different generations now under one roof. And so if you really peel back the layer, bottom line is money is stressful. As you look at the, even over the pandemic, right? Mental health was obviously one of the key factors that people were taking a look at to help with employees. But even when you peel that layer, money is stressful. If you're stressed about money, it's going to affect just about everything about your life, relationships, sleep, productivity, all aspects are really going to seep into it. And so now I can't work as effectively. I don't know what to do. I don't even know where to go to get some of these resources. And so, there's been survey after survey after survey, 93% of employees actually want their employer to offer any of these types of benefits out there. And really in the past, it's been kind of like wrapped up into an EAP, or there's been I hate to say it, the free check the box that like some of the record keepers do, that they'll give like the once a year webinar. And then like to actually talk to somebody, you have to hit 0 1,000 times to be able to actually get to somebody. And they really don't want you to talk to someone because human beings are expensive. And then you even say, all right, who are the people I should be talking to? Like if I had money, where would I go and who should I be talking to? Well, financial guidance, the way it's set up right now, is really meant for the wealthy. Like if you go to like a CFP in the open market, they don't want to talk to you unless you have about $500,000 in assets, which, let's face it, most Americans don't, most people don't, especially as we see this double-digit increases, and everybody else is just trying to live paycheck to paycheck. So there's a bit of I don't know where to go. People are Googling stuff. They're going on Reddit forums because obviously everybody became rich over GameStop and they want to go and make more money off that. So it's really interesting where people are going to get resources. So all this coupled together is making employers and making the market say there's got to be a lot to be desired for the employees. So why go through the work place and then go through the employer? Well, frankly, wealth starts at work, right? If my paycheck is where it all starts, what ends up happening a lot of times is I get this paycheck and then I start making all these decisions, whether it's like, am I putting enough money in my 401k? Am I paying enough on student loans? Am I paying enough on credit cards? Am I funding my HSA and my FSA? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? There's so many decisions to make when you get that initial paycheck, and then you maybe net out whatever is left and say, how do I invest this properly? Where the way we're looking at financial wellness is it's no longer just about retirement. It's anything that touches a dollar is really the best way to be able to look at it. So there's a cause and effect to everything, and don't make a decision in a vacuum, especially when you have all these different pieces to take a look at. And next slide here, and I know we're moving along for the sake of time here, but so expanding the definition of financial wellness, so it's not just so myopically focused on like a student loan or just retirement. It's managing your money well. Like, how do you meet day-to-day expenses? Like, do you actually have a budget? Do you spend within your means? Like, are you maxing out credit cards? Do you understand all your interest rates? Like, do you have an emergency buffered, just in case anything happens, right? And even staying on track for these things. So having a handle on debt, all of these things are financial wellness, because money doesn't discriminate and stress doesn't discriminate. All these things really do have a cause and effect. So that's what we're expanding, and that's where I think it's only going to get deeper on that level of personalization going into 23.
Wow. I have so many questions for you about, I love the line you said about anything that touches a dollar, right, is financial wellness. Anything that touches a dollar. That was, I like that section. There's another section in there I like about just wondering how Origin is helping all people, right? Not just the wealthy, but all people, all employees do that. So I'd love to save maybe that question for the end, but I think we probably need to keep moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, so switching gears and Jeff, just to kind of tee up your section here. We've obviously talked about the inflationary environment multiple times on our chat this morning. So given that, how do you see that manifesting into the employer's financial wellness solutions?
Yeah, thanks, Chad. And again, to Jake and Workterra for bringing this all together today. Quickly, Jeff Morgan, Vice President here at Salary Finance. And I think when we think about inflation, it's interesting, right? Because there's no disagreement here that inflation's directly impacted everything. It's exposed some problems that have maybe existed for a long time, like Chad was touching on, affordable housing or retirement readiness, but also made employers think of things that maybe wasn't always on their radar before, like the correlation between mental health and financial wellness. And I think from an employer's perspective, what's challenging is trying to figure out like what to do, where to start, where the opportunity to help the most exist, recognizing that if you ask 10 people to describe their financial stresses, you're going to get 11 or 12 different answers, right? So thinking to Chad's question, I think my mind shifts to the broad topic around debt. And the reality is the picture isn't pretty. Thinking back to Chad's stat about living paycheck to paycheck, the stats on this page, I think, is the subsequent result of that. Debt is the consequence of financial literacy not being properly taught in schools, at home, at your place of work. Debt is the consequence of employees not having enough in emergency savings. Debt is the consequence of a financial system, frankly, that's designed to make money off the backs of the less fortunate. And whether someone's charging more to their credit card because they're being irresponsible or because they don't know better, or frankly, it's their only option, it doesn't actually really matter. The stress and consequences of carrying that debt is the same regardless of the circumstance. And what happens when someone maxes out a credit card or is denied access to capital altogether, or they want to keep their financial strife hidden from their loved ones, right? Well, they borrow against their retirement. Almost 1 in 5 employees did so in the past year. You know, we're not talking about a handful of employees here. We're talking about almost 20%. And the situation's even more dire when we think about payday loans, which has seen an employee become 3 times as likely to access this year. In fact, nearly 1 in 3 people of color will use a payday loan this year. And so Chad touched on this, but I'll reiterate, because I think it's maybe for me the biggest takeaway we have today is that employees are expecting their employer to help. It's the right thing to do. In a recent study we conducted, 92% of employees believe finances have a negative effect on their mental health, and 3 out of 4 believe their mental health would improve if their employer provided financial well-being support. So want to open it up to the group real quick and hear some guesses here. Talked about payday loans earlier. What would be the group's best guess as to what the average interest rate is for those taking out a payday loan?
Like 50%?
That's pretty high. That's
There's
pretty
fees
high.
and stuff like 50%. I don't know.
Yeah. Why don't we? I see some 27. I see 25.
Yeah, I was
Why
gonna
don't
say
we-
50.
Yeah, let's go ahead and spoiler alert, Jake. Let's go to the next slide. It's actually 391%. If you're fortunate enough to live in Texas, it's going to be over 600%. And if you're thinking yes, and it seems like they are everywhere, well, you're correct. There are actually more payday lenders in America, over 22,000, than there are McDonald's. And again, we're talking about 15% of the population here accessing a payday loan in 2022. And the reality is, it's crippling families. It's destroying worker morale. It's putting people into a situation where they're stuck, regardless of whatever good, sound financial decisions they make starting today. The decisions they've made in the past has them stuck. And so when we think about debt, like this question is like, so what's the path out of debt, right? And is it better financial planning? Is it better education? Is it better savings habits? Yes, it's all of those things, but changing future behavior cannot and does not negate past decisions, especially when the system is designed to make that very exercise very hard to do. And so I had said earlier that if you ask 10 people to describe their financial stresses, you'd get a dozen different answers. But I think if you boil it down, a common through line of those responses would be they actually just need access to cash and capital in a way that's fair, that's equitable, that's financially sound for them, that allows them to address this economic shock. And so quickly, you know, that's where salary finance comes in and what we do. We're a holistic financial wellness platform that believes to get people on the right path financially, we must first tackle the economic shock they're facing from a debt perspective. So what we do is we offer low interest rate loans through payroll deductions so that employees can consolidate their debt at a much lower rate. We save them money, we improve their credit scores, we lift the burden of being stressed about that debt and get them on the path to begin to address their future financial goals. But it's not, for us, just debt consolidation. Oftentimes, an employee just needs money, right? They're starting a new job in a new city and they need a deposit for their new apartment. They've got an unexpected car or home repair. They need help paying a medical or legal bill. Ultimately, though, what we want to do is get them out of a cycle of debt and into a habit of savings so that when that next car repair hits unexpectedly or that first medical bill hits for the year, employees actually have the cash on hand to pay. And so certainly inflation has turbocharged the debt side of the ledger. And I think what's interesting is like, this isn't an employee benefit or voluntary benefit conversation, right? It's a lifestyle conversation. It's a just affecting all of us, not just workers, but Americans. So as I think about that on the debt side of the ledger, I'd be curious to hear, first of all, anything else the group would add before I kick it over to Sid.
I also wanted to add to the through line that you talked about, Jeff, which is, and Chad covered this as well, this aspect of mental health and financial health.
Yeah.
We know from all the research that these are, of course, linked. But one thing that I specifically want people on the call to take away is that when employers, people that are leading, corporations from small businesses to large, right? When they're asked about what is the number one priority, they are thinking about mental health. But when you're talking to employees themselves, it's always money, because money turns out is the number one source of stress, as has been pointed out. And this is also where the obligation does fall upon the employer. I'm just going to state something very basic, which is employees work for employers for money. It turns out that that's the number one reason that relationship exists.
Right.
Yeah, good point. So Sid, I'd be curious to hear from you how you're kind of seeing, you talked about the worker working for money, how you're seeing the American workers' assets change over time, and then maybe how you see that savings component playing a role in financial wellness.
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you both for the work that you're doing. And just as a reminder, I'm the founder and CEO of Sunny Day Fund. I have personally lived through a lot of the hardships, so I can definitely talk about this from that perspective. The questions go that way. But let's just paint a picture, right? I think that we've talked about how inflation is helping, but this is not just an income level conversation. So when we're looking about this, every single financial planner will say, hey, you have to have at least 3 months of emergency savings on hand, 6 months ideally. When you're looking at folks that are across the board, nearly 2 in 3 individuals, working Americans, are not having those emergency savings in place. And by the way, this was in January 2022, and I can tell you that this chart has only gotten worse. But one of the things that will shock you, which is like once we start getting into that upper middle income and upper income segments, it's still a very substantial number of people that don't have those critical emergency savings on hand. And this is before we were even thinking about retirement savings or house ownership or any of these other ways that wealth ends up being a part of the picture. So if we go to the next slide, how has this trended over time? And this is, I'll point out this resource. It's a great resource. It's called the Financial Health Network. They do an annual survey of a significant number of people. And one thing that you can see is that specifically savings and financial confidence have gotten worse. And it's driven in part by higher forced spending. So we're talking about that cost of consumption on our basics, things like housing, things like groceries increasing. But not only that, if you fundamentally think about, as Jeff alluded to, what has happened over the course of the last 2 to 3 years, we're talking about a series of financial shocks, just crap happening to our lives, whether we like it or not. Maybe it's something that happened to us health-wise with COVID, or it's something that happened to our car, something that happened to our extended family member, something that happened to our home, something that happened with us changing jobs that we didn't anticipate, right? All of these things are now, just to Jeff's point, a lifestyle and livelihood conversation. So one of the pieces that I did want to elevate to extend on this is, yes, we are talking about retirements. We have been stuck on this conversation of retirement savings as an employer side obligation, but I do want to make sure that we're extending beyond that to debt, which was mentioned earlier, but also specifically liquid savings, emergency savings. Why is that? Because that is the number one driver in financial well-being. If you're thinking about financial shocks as the time where that hurricane comes and hits, and unfortunately we're experiencing that financial shock, and you have to address it right away, that's important. We need to address that debt or asset driven. But at the end of the day, it's also important that we're building up our own levies. And that's where emergency savings are coming in. This is something that 9 in 10 working adults want. The data does show that when you have $1,000 in emergency savings, that cuts 401k loans and hardship withdrawals in halves. And it does, of course, drive productivity, retention, all these other soft elements that at the end of the day drive a real return on investment for the employer. And the other thing that is important about this is that employers are not in isolation in this discussion, right? At the end of the day, while they're making a decision about this, they need to understand that the broader policy world is also shifting. We're thinking about a world where policy is bringing in automatic enrollment into emergency savings, where not just emergency savings, but more broadly financial literacy and financial education are being instilled at the grade school level. And I think that these are positive movements, and I encourage all employers as well as influencers such as benefit brokers to be a part of that movement. So with that, I will turn it back over to Jake here for directing the conversation forward.
Yeah, I really appreciated what you were just talking about and the series of financial shocks that we are experiencing, right? And then talking about how planning ahead for those emergency savings funds. On your slide earlier talked about, how many people have 3 months worth of savings, but I've seen a lot of articles, and if Chad or Jeff, any of you want to chime in on this, they talk about having 3 months worth of savings built up, but like I've heard and read some articles where it's between $400 and $700 that if there was a small expense as low as that, it's going to put a lot of American families into a financial bind. So what are you even seeing down at that low? Like how do you see that impact families?
Yeah, if I can take a first crack for Jeff here. So one of the really interesting ways that question is asked specifically, can you get your hands on $500 or $400 or $250, some kind of minor financial emergency, if we want to think about it that way. It's like, how are you able to finance that, whether it's coming out of your savings or it's coming out of your debt? And that's where you're seeing these large numbers. But if you're only strictly thinking about savings, that the number, of course, is by far worse. And Jeff, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts there too.
Yeah, I think the answer, Jake, is like, it's all connected. And I think to Sid's point, if you have a stat from January of 2022, regardless of what measure it's measuring from financial health, it's probably worse in October of 2022. And I think that's where we've seen kind of the increases around debt, is because what people would traditionally be able to afford from a cash flow perspective just aren't able to in 2022. I think the stat I saw was something like 60% of Americans don't have that $400 or $500 to grab. And then the reality is, like, whereas that was maybe the measure of an economic shock in the past, like in my mind, economic shock now is it's going to have a comma with it, right? It's going to be $1,000, whether you're talking about a car repair or home repair or rent at an apartment. Like that $400, because of inflation and all those things, isn't even really a good measuring stick of what you need for that economic shock that you're going to absorb.
Gotcha, man. Fantastic. And Chad, one last response. We're at our time, so I want to be very respectful of people's times. But Chad, I want to give you one last response to chime in and either answer that question or just talk about how Origin is making financial wellness available to all people. That's one of those things that you talked about. It's usually for the rich, but you guys have done that. So I wanted to give you one last chance to chime in, Chad, before we wrap up here real quick.
Yeah, appreciate that. And, agree with everything Sid and Jeff said on the cash flow piece. I think, the other aspect is that for the last 2 years, again, not that long ago, we were all sitting at home ordering everything from DoorDash and Uber Eats and subscribing to every streaming platform, just, doing it because we're like, whatever, what else are we going to do sitting around here? And then now people don't even know what they're spending money on. I think it's like the basic financial hygiene of like, do you even know what you're spending money on? It's astounding what people don't actually realize is going out of their paycheck or auto renewals or all that type of stuff that happens. So yeah, that's interesting from our standpoint as well. But Origin, we have built a proprietary network of certified financial planners so that now if an employer offers Origin, every single employee gets unlimited access to them, as well as a robust software for budgeting, cash flow, spending, retirement, equity, and management, total rewards, all that under one roof. So if I'm 22 and swimming in college debt, or I'm 65 and just trying to figure out what does retirement look like, now you're actually going to get unlimited access to a CFP, even without those assets under management. So it's a great way to be able to actually connect people to get that personalized approach.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for jumping in. Chad, Sid, Jeff, you guys are awesome. So thank you. Time is up, but I can stay on if anyone does want to ask any other questions. But otherwise, thank you guys so much. And feel free to reach out to any of these people directly, or you can reach out to me and I will make an introduction for you. So thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake.
Bet.